Good morning, everyone. We are continuing money magnetism. We're now up to the chapters called How Much Wealth is Available and a couple of other things. That'll be very interesting, I hope. I shouldn't tell you in advance. This is going to be very interesting. I'm going to say, I hope this is going to be very interesting. It's been very interesting to me, which is at least a good start, because then I'm not bored when I'm talking to you. So I hope that you also will enjoy it. So let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, divine friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to all. Help us to feel your guiding presence as we try to absorb these all-important ideas. Help us to be transformed on every level of our lives, that the practical side flows with as much inspiration as our meditation, and that our meditation be as dynamic as our commitment to take care of our lives in this world. Help us to see that there is no part of our existence that is separate from you, from your love and your guidance and your joy. Om. Peace. Amen. You know, one of the things that I'm often asked when people talk to me, there's this natural desire to feel that we are growing spiritually, and a natural desire to want to put more energy into growing spiritually. And because, of course, meditation, devotion to God, all kinds of devotional practices, yoga, energization, and on, are all unique aspects of the path of self-realization. When we think about growing spiritually, people's inclination is directed in that way. This is a very Rajasic planet that we're living on. Rajasic means it's just very energized. It's always doing things. America is a very Rajasic country. We're very busy. We don't spend a lot of time just doing nothing. We're always doing something. And this thought can get in your mind that this is my spiritual life and this is my ordinary daily life. And then one wants to know how to put more energy into one's spiritual life, not realizing that part of the reason we don't feel like we're putting out enough energy is because we have put up these artificial categories. If you think of it just philosophically, when am I ever separate from God? When is there a moment when when I'm not able to be attuned to God, if I were able to be attuned? And the other part of it is it's very essential, which is why we're having this whole conversation about money magnetism, why Swami wrote the book, why we're dealing with it, is it's easier to get a grip on things that are already more in your hands when we're meditating and we're dealing with non-material dimensions. We learn to be able to focus energy and attention on those dimensions, and to be as dynamic in them as we are in picking up physical objects and moving them around. But since we spend so much of our life in the material world, one of the very specific messages that Master actually brought to the West is it's a seamless whole. There's no point at which you can cut it, which is one of the reasons why Master came to the West, why he built an organization, why he started all these enterprises in this world, why he urged communities, why Swami Kriyananda devoted himself to making places on this planet where spiritual life could be manifest, where people could understand, and well, Master had the great phrase, home, job, and church in one place. But what that means is that one's spiritual and ordinary life become one integrated whole. That was among countless reasons why I was so magnetized to come and live at Ananda, was because I was very frustrated by having a fragmented life. I wanted it to be one seamless whole, and it was easier, of course, to literally make my work Ananda, which is what I've done. I've been able to do. I've been blessed to be able to do for my entire adult life. But in theory, it's always possible, because how we respond minute to minute is who we are spiritually. We don't just become spiritual when we go and sit down on our meditation cushion. It's not at that point we have a relationship with God and Guru. We've had it at every other point of our life as well. It just depends on how we're relating to it. And since money is such a compelling aspect of life, it's just, we can't get away from it on this planet. I mean, we can minimize its importance, we can balance it, the necessity, we can use it in all sorts of ways, but one way or another, I was just reading Master's own words, even the greatest saints, one way or another, money comes in there for a really simple reason, which is that money is a crystallized form of energy. And energy is the unifying theme in all of existence. And it's a scientific fact, matter is not even really there. It's just a form of energy. Energy itself is consciousness. And so I'm just making those as statements. Swami actually deals with it to a certain extent in this book, but it's in many different places. I'm not going to try to explain it at this point, but it's all a seamless whole. And part of what our delusion is that we can't see that we get hypnotized by form. And then when we become hypnotized by form, that in itself is the delusion, is that Maya has persuaded us that this is what's divine and this is what's material, but it's all divine. So when we come into money, which the question we're asking today is wealth a finite reality? And there's a lot of, as Swami explains it, there's a lot of hypnosis in people's minds that if I get more, you get less. If he's very wealthy, then these people are poorer. And yes, of course, you can track it out, how wealth accumulates in one place, and often it's taken at the disadvantage of others. This is sort of the story of big industrialists who exploit their employees, or slavery itself, where an economy is built on the helpless labor of others. And there's lots of ways in which it seems that one takes and the others lose, which causes us to start thinking in our mind that wealth itself is a finite commodity. So part of what we're trying to understand, just to have the right attitude and the right consciousness, and we've said it before, but let's say it again from another angle. Money is a particular manifestation of energy, but the power to attract money is about the flow of our energy. And once we get into the concept of energy, this is among the many wonderful teachings that Master brought us. He even brought us specifically the energization exercises, which was Master's original contribution to the practice of self-realization, where we use our will to draw energy, and we can draw as much energy as we have the will to draw it. And once we start talking about energy is a limitless quantity. Everything in creation is a manifestation of energy. Everything in creation is a manifestation of the consciousness of the divine. And by its very definition, the word infinite is used. We don't even know how to think about the word infinite, but the meaning that the little mind that wants to consider infinite can't understand infinite, but we get the idea that there's a lot of it. And when we start working with our willpower and our energy, we also begin to understand that I can have as much energy as I set my will to have. And of course, we have physical limitations, we have emotional limitations, but the limitations aren't inherent in the system. However, what makes it, but if we start thinking about hoarding and accumulating, and how much can I, surround and put into a box and keep there. I told you of my several minute strange memory from the past when I had this great desire to fill my closet with gold bullion so I could just go in there and touch it and look at it and feel it. It was just a crazy sort of thought form from God knows what incarnation that just went through my mind. But I could feel this attachment to the form that wealth was going to take. And in that case, I was thinking of it in terms of gold. And I think there were some jewels in my closet in my imagination as well. And it was just the picture. Some of you remember the Donald Duck cartoons, and there was Uncle Scrooge. And Uncle Scrooge used to dive through his piles of coins, and he would play. He was, the exaggerated picture of the miser who literally loved the form it had taken. So the more the mind begins to think about the form, once you're into form, things have become rigid instead of flexible. As long as you're standing back and thinking in terms of energy, then you can always, there's always more. There's always a creative possibility. So Swamiji wants to help us to understand, to get away from the thought of limited potential, that the supply of wealth in the universe is only dependent upon our degree of magnetism, and our degree of magnetism is our energy. Now this also ties into many things that we've been talking about all along the way. You can't just affirm that, because to affirm it, even if you're stating a truth, this whole world is an illusion and it's just a field of light. Well, just when I say that, I can say it and believe it, but when I look at it, it's still there. Swami was fond of telling the story about a man who'd read that, if you command the prayer can move mountains. And so this man, there was a mountain that was blocking his view of the ocean, and he commanded God to move the mountain so he could see the ocean. The next morning when the mountain was still there, he said, "I knew you'd still be there." Meaning he didn't have the energy, he didn't really have the faith. He was just playing with intellectual ideas. So when we start thinking about the unlimited potential of wealth, that is just a question of my generating the magnetism to just say, I have all the magnetism in the world. We have to actually match that, because the universe is impersonal. It's not persuaded by our brilliant articulation. It's persuaded by the actual energy that we put out, which is what we've been talking about all along. You have to really become practical in your idealism. Let me just for a second. In the Bible, there's a parable about a man who gives to each of his servants one talent. Talent was a coin, as it happened. The meaning of it, of course, is shifted, but it was a coin, and he came back in a year or after a period of time to see what each of his people had done with that talent. And the ones who had used that talent to generate more talent, which is to say, to generate energy, invested it or worked with it in some way that multiplied the energy. But then there was one who just buried it. He took the talent. He was from his employer. His employer would want it back. He buried it in the ground. And when it was time, he just dug it up and handed it back. And his employer was very displeased with him. This is a parable. Because instead of using that energy, he just hoarded it fearfully, for fear of losing it. And Swamiji talks about the oddity of the fact that often the more money people get, the more fearful they become about losing it, because once you begin to hoard it, the thought is in your mind that there's a finite amount and I have to hold on to it. Whereas if we know that it's energy, we recognize that the laws of energy are the laws of free-flowing water. And that the more we are dynamically engaged, the more powerful that flow will come. And if we stop the flow, Swamiji talks about sitting with some of his relatives who were fairly wealthy, and there was as he describes it in this book, he said, there was an advertisement for this extraordinarily expensive house. And they were just talking about it. And Swami just commented, as he said, without thinking about the wealth of his relatives, he just commented, imagine having so much money and then spending it all on yourself. And the wealthy people to whom he was speaking said, well, that's an unusual point of view. And Swami's point of view was, how could you have any other point of view? Because the other law of the universe that we're trying to work with here is that we are a part of a greater reality. And even if we're trying to generate income, I was hearing about a friend of ours who took a college degree in a fairly impractical subject. And when he graduated from college, he decided, well, what he really needed to do was earn money. And this is a man who'd been raised in the Ananda community with the values that we have. And so he took a job as a salesman because he was very personable and very articulate. He immediately became just the best salesman in his whole company, and it's a position he held for as long as he wanted to hold it. And it was so bewildering to him that his success was unusual to people because he just wanted to help. He just wanted to help people. And so if he was trying to sell something to them, his interest was first, which is, how can I help you? What do you need? If you actually need what I'm selling, then let me tell you why this is good. But if you don't need it, why would I try to persuade you? Because I'm here to help you. I was remembering, I have this electric bicycle, and which was a wonderful gift to me a number of years ago, and I totally enjoy it. And it was time for it to have its little, annual checkup or whatever is needed. And so I took it into this bike shop nearby, which I like the shop, and it's convenient. I went in and I said, he needs a checkup. She needs to check up my bicycle, and her tire is flat, and few things that were needed. And the clerk immediately said to me, oh, there's a store that concentrates just on this particular kind of bicycle, and it's just a couple of miles away, and they'll do all this work for you for free. I mean, I'd walked in to give him business. And I said, because you said that, I really want you to fix my bike. Because clearly you're not interested in yourself, you're interested in me. And they fixed it, and I paid them for it. It was a modest price. It wasn't a huge amount of money. But just what a perfectly natural thing to do. I even went and told his boss. I didn't tell his boss exactly what he said because I didn't know whether his boss would appreciate it or not. But I did tell him that he had a very good employee there and that he should pay attention to it. In his material success course, Swami draws a story about two bakers. One is Mr. Crumpet and one is Mr. Baker. And he talks about one of them is only there to get money from people, and the other one is there to help people. So if we're giving, so who do you go to visit? You go to the one who has your interests at heart. It's just too obvious, isn't it? That's what attracts. That's what attracts in the greater sense. I was one of the most famous entrepreneurs, and as a consequence, one of the richest men in the world Steve Jobs became the entrepreneur. And there were many things about his life that were exceedingly interesting, but one that I really enjoyed reading because he innovated and changed. I mean, he created a tremendous amount of the world we live in. He also had, interestingly, a deep connection to Yogananda. So Dwapara Yuga comes in on many levels. But when he was working with some aspect of what he was doing, people suggested to him conventional wisdom. You should go out and do market research, you should test, you should see what people want. And he rather incredulously said, they don't know what they want yet because I haven't invented it. And he just put his mind to even what he knew people were looking for and what would benefit their lives, even before they themselves knew it. because his consciousness was spread out into the whole world. How can I really bring about a new reality here? He could see the potential of this technology that other people couldn't even see. And his mindset was not on earning money. His mindset was on creating a new and a positive reality. And he literally just brought in ideas that no one had even thought of. See, this is the creative potential. We are part of the infinite whole, and the creative possibilities are simply endless. How can I serve? What do people need? What will be of benefit to them? Just give me a moment. There was a thought floating around. Whatever it was, it went away. Just give me a second here. Oh, I know what it was. I was so amused. The Grateful Dead, of course, is a band that became extremely popular after a while. Just as it happened, they were a Palo Alto-based band. And when I was my 1 year at college at Stanford, they were just starting. The Grateful Dead were just starting. And once I lost interest in going to my classes, I gained interest in going to parties on the weekends. And the Grateful Dead were just playing here and there, mostly house parties, and you'd sort of find out where the party was. And I loved to dance at that point, and they would play and I would dance. I did this for a few months. It wasn't like a lifestyle. But so I was part of their beginning reality, which I never was ever interested in them after that, but because I got into the spiritual path and did something different. But I was very amused when I heard an interview because, much to their own surprise, they became extremely successful and very wealthy, even though they were never doing it for the money, ever. They were just doing it for the music. And so they interviewed one of their band members and asked him, "What's the difference now? You used to be very poor. You were a poor musician. Now you're a rich musician. What's the difference?" And so the guy said, when you buy a bag of pistachios, he said they all have a crack and you can open them, but there's some where there's no crack and it's really hard to get to the pistachio. He said, when I was poor, I would just tough it out until I was able to open every one of them. Now, he said, when I come to those closed shells, I just throw them away. I'm sure there was more to his life than that. But it's always just seemed to me, yeah, I guess that's what you do. Now you can just throw them away. And that sort of puts it like it is, because he was also saying, and this is what Swami writes, if we become contractive in our consciousness, that in itself is the definition of suffering. We might not realize what's causing us to suffer, but I was talking about that yesterday. We either are contractive or expansive. And when we think that money is a limited quantity, then we become contractive around it, where we hesitate to give. We hesitate, even people become so strange, they hesitate even to use the money they have because they become afraid that it's just, I'm going to drain the pond and that's going to be the end of it. So we have to constantly, not just in regard to money, but in everything we do, we have to constantly be in touch with this feeling that there is unlimited potential. This comes back to what Swami said, prosperity is creativity. Prosperity is the ability to simply adjust to what is and to just shift as needed, and knowing that if there's a problem, there's also going to be a solution. And that, well, it also works the other way. This was when we were very first starting out with Ananda all those years ago, and we didn't have any money. And, it was a question, like, what would happen to us when we got older? I have to say that, being able to retire, we have no pension system within Ananda. Being able to retire, even if a person is at retirement age, is not as simple an option as we thought it would be when we started this. And so I remember having discussions when I say we because the founding members were very much of the same age, even within a few years of each other. So when we were, moving around, maybe crossing 30, having started in our early 20s, we had some discussion about this. Like what will happen? How will and the phrasing of the conversation was important. How will Ananda take care of us when we're older? And I remember Nitai, who stood up and said just very simply, he said, I did not make a bargain with any institution. He said, I have given this incarnation to God, and if at the end of my life I'm impoverished and living under a bridge, I will accept that as God's will for me. Just like that. He said, Ananda doesn't owe me anything. And I so admired that, because that is really how we have to think about this. I'm giving my life to, if I live by high principles, and if I truly with all my heart commit myself to those principles, and that is sadhana. That's what sadhana is. It's not just energization and kriya and yoga postures or chanting. Sadhana is moment by moment, what do I really think is true? So when I have a certain amount of money, and tomorrow we're going to talk about tithing, and I have the opportunity to give, I have the opportunity to help people, I have the opportunity to use the money in a creative and dynamic way that will serve other people. We shouldn't be impractical, we shouldn't be foolish, we shouldn't be impulsive, but nor should we be afraid. Fear is the enemy of everything. So this is where Swami wants us to even just start. What is the very definition? Money is crystallized energy, but energy is the source of my confidence. And energy, I can always have at will. Even when physical energy may begin to decline for various reasons, I can always have the energy of love. I can always have the energy of faith. I can always have the energy of devotion to God. I know I've shared with you all a beautiful statement of a friend of mine who went through a long period of ill health where she simply wasn't able to do any of the things that she normally did. And instead of feeling like she wasn't contributing, her prayer became, well, Lord, even if I just have to spend the rest of my life mostly as an invalid, I'll be one more person in this world who's on your side. I love the way that was put. I'll be one more person in this world who's on your side. And that's what we have to always be thinking, and resisting any temptation that says, oh, this is all I have to keep it, because what will happen if? Now, I really want to say this again because it's very important. We also have to be practical. God doesn't want us to be foolish. All of the masters were practical. Swamiji was very, very expansive in the way that he thought about things, but he never risked everything. And it's the only way. He never risked everything. He always had a fallback position, because it's in certain ways it's presumptuous to risk everything. And you have to really be certain of your calling if you're going to risk everything. Or even if you risk everything you have, but you know that you have the energy to recreate, then it's not presumptuous to do it. But Swami was just always he was not impulsive. That's the word I want to use. He wasn't driven. He was always very balanced. He put almost all of it behind this project, but he had a little bit over here in case he had to start over. Even when he was working very hard to start the center in San Francisco, because the Ananda Center, because he thought it was the most dynamic center of influence, he also started a center in Sacramento at the same time, so that if San Francisco didn't work out, we could retreat to Sacramento. That was when I really realized, he never risks everything, does he? He just thinks about it, but then generously thinks, how can I serve? Knowing that as long as the connection with the divine is there, then there'll always be another creative flow that is possible. And the more freely we can feel this, the more powerfully we can give, and the more powerfully we can use our talents in the service of the world, the more magnetism we have, and then that becomes the magnetism that allows us to attract whatever we need. You see how it all begins to work together as a seamless whole. God bless you.